All right, it's Wednesday night. That's right, it sure is. And this is the live Panther-Lair Show here on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. Looking forward to an hour of Pitt sports talk here with you. I'm Chris Peak from Panther-Lair.com. You should know that website by now, Panther-Lair.com. Pitt site on the 24/7 Sports Network. Great place to get all of your Pitt sports coverage. A lot of coverage of Pitt spring camp so far. Started last week, and we had a lot of coverage this week as well. Be back down at spring camp on the south side tomorrow morning, so look for coverage coming out. Our spring camp reports always get into details on what we see and what we hear and what we're observing and what we're knowing and what we're guessing and what we're thinking. Lots of Pitt football coverage, and then, of course, photos and videos and all those different things you've come to expect from Panther-Lair.com's training camp and spring camp coverage. We've got that right there at Panther-Lair.com. And if you missed our 75% off sale, shame on you. You could get 75% off the first year of your subscription to Panther-Lair.com. You missed out on that. You missed out. But we got one that's not better, but it's still a pretty good deal. You can get 50% off your first year at Panther-Lair.com. That's a great deal. I mean, we're still basically giving it away. I understand, it's a new site. People are unsure about it. Should they check it out? Should they try the new site? Whatever. But, well, here, we'll give it to you for 50% off. Get all the recruiting info, get all the team info, everything going on in the world of Pitt sports. Panther-Lair.com. You can get it for 50% off. If you go to the front page of Panther-Lair.com right now, you'll see over on the right-hand or left-hand column, I should say, it says Go VIP, 50% off annual membership. Go check that out and join the conversation. Because, what I always used to say is we do these Wednesday night live shows. You guys post in the comments and questions over on the, over on the right side of the screen, already in the chat. People were chiming in, having to, sharing their thoughts and comments and questions on Pitt football and Pitt basketball. And it's fun. We have a fun time during these hour-long shows every Wednesday night. But the message boards at Panther-Lair.com are like this, like all day, every day. Is this kind of conversation going on? People ask comments or people ask questions and post their comments. Other fans chime in. I chime in. We have a good it's a good report. It's a good back and forth. I'm reading some of the comments and questions already. I'm looking forward to getting into these conversations. I think it'll be fun. A fun night of Pitt sports talk here. But this is what we do all day, every day on the message boards at Panther-Lair.com. So if you're looking for the best online community, I'm in across platforms. I don't care if it's, social media, Twitter, Facebook, other, websites, whatever it might be, Reddit. Is there a Pitt football Reddit? I don't even know if there is. There's a University of Pittsburgh Reddit that might include the sports, but I think we have the best online community of Pitt sports fans, Panther-Lair.com. And got a lot that I'm thinking about today, thinking a lot that we're thinking about this week between Pitt's decision to skip the NIT. I think that came out. When did they announce that? Friday? The decision to skip the NIT, I think, is worthy of a conversation here tonight. Some final kind of wrap-up thoughts on the season, I think, is kind of worthy of a conversation here tonight. And then, of course, spring camp, what we've seen and learned, and some other thoughts on Pitt football, all worthy of conversation here tonight. So we got a lot to talk about. And you can, steer the conversation, jump in on the conversation with your comments and questions right over there, like Adam Vinchik did. He got us started with this question. What's the biggest thing you've been looking for when you go to camp? So we've been at 3 Pitt spring practices so far. Tuesday, Thursday last week, and then yesterday. Yesterday was the 4th practice of spring. They had one on Saturday where they put on full pads for the first time. That was closed to the media. And so we didn't see that. So we, the media, we've been able to watch portions of 3 practices thus far. And we get to see the first half hour, 40 minutes or so, somewhere around there. And that includes some special teams, some stretching. Yeah, sometimes you'll get to see one player throw a football to another. That's always exciting. We like watching those things. But that's what we get to see. So when I've been at practice for these 3 days, I mean, some of the things that you're looking for right off the bat, those first 2 practices, you're just looking to put eyes on all the new guys. You know what I mean? You're looking to check out all those new players who came in. I think they brought in 13 transfers and they got, 10 or maybe more freshmen who have enrolled early. And so you're looking to just get eyes on those guys and see how they look, just physically. What do you think? And I'm impressed with some of these guys. I really am getting a little bullish about these defensive ends they brought in. Blaine Spires from Utah State, Jaden Moore from Oregon, and Joey Zielinski from Eastern Michigan. I really think these guys can make an impact. Somebody asked on the message boards the other day, do you feel like these transfer defensive ends, these three guys, will make more of an impact than the three transfer defensive ends did last year? And I do. And I mean, it's sort of setting a low bar. David Ojebwe never played. Chief Borders played a lot and never did anything. And Nate Matlack played a lot, was really close to doing a lot of things, but never quite got there, put up the sack numbers that a guy with his kind of pressure rate, and pass rush win rate. All the Steelers beat writers, they just had a little tingle in their ears, like someone just mentioned pass rush win rate. I must go kill them. Like Nate Matlack got a lot of pressures, won a lot of pass rush plays, but never really produced the sacks that you need to get or you would like to get out of with his kind of success rushing the passer. It sort of fell short or was unfulfilled because he didn't get the sacks and make those plays behind the line of scrimmage. So those were the three guys they brought in last year. The three guys they brought in this year, Spires and Zielinski, are old players. They're in their final year of eligibility. They've got a lot of playing time experience and production under their belt. Moore is a young player. He's a redshirt sophomore, redshirt freshman, but he played a decent amount at Oregon last year, and I think is pretty promising as a young guy. I think the feedback I'm hearing is that the coaches are pretty optimistic about all three of those defensive ends, that they think all three of those guys are going to be able to make plays and produce this year. Spires and Zielinski in particular, but Moore as well. And that's really where they need help the most. And it's sort of a double whammy of needing help because their defensive ends weren't very good last year. They didn't produce a whole lot last year out of the defensive end position. And then the guys that they lost, they lost Borders, they lost Ojebwe. I think I don't think that really moves the needle one way or the other, to be honest. I think both of those guys, there were high expectations for what they could do, and they fell pretty far short of it. Ojebwe is still pretty young. Borders is kind of young too. So I mean, maybe they'll turn into something. I think Ojebwe went to Norfolk State and Borders went to like UNLV or something like that. So maybe they'll be able to produce at those levels as they get older and grow. But I don't think that moves the needle much. The one defensive end that you really were disappointed to lose was Sincere Edwards. A guy who was a true freshman, played a lot as a true freshman last year, looked really promising, looked like he could be really good, as soon as 2025 and certainly in 2026. I mean, could be a really productive player. And he went in the portal and ended up going home effectively to UCF, where he was committed before he flipped to Pitt a couple of years ago, and he ends up back at UCF, and I think he's going to be really good. And so that's the loss that really hurts, but it's a net gain. I think when you look at, if you put Edwards, Borders, Ojebwe on one side of the transfer portal ledger, and you put Spires, Zielinski, Moore on the other side, I think it's absolutely a win for Pitt. Edwards was the biggest loss, but I think these other three guys that they brought in are going to outproduce what Ojebwe and Borders brought last year, and potentially what the entirety of the defensive end position brought last year, outside of Jimmy Scott, who is returning. So, a long-winded answer, Adam. You asked, what am I looking for when I go to spring camp? I mean, those defensive ends, and particularly as newcomers, guys who are coming in to play big roles and really contribute to this defense and to the pass rush. Ditto for the wide receivers. I mean, they brought in three wide receivers, Andy Jean from Florida and Kateris Blue Hicks from Louisville and Deuce Spann from Florida State. All three of those guys, I was really curious to see what they look like in person. I mean, I knew Deuce Spann was tall, and he's the tallest receiver they've got on the roster. Certainly the tallest scholarship guy. There might be a walk-on who's taller, but he's definitely the tallest scholarship receiver, and I think he might be the tallest receiver overall. But I was curious to see what Blue Hicks and Andy Jean look like size-wise, because they sort of felt on paper like more of the same. Similar size to Raphael Williams and Sincere Lee. Kanate Mumfield, who's a little bit bigger than those guys. I think Andy Jean is more in the mold of Kanate Mumfield. Like he's got similar size to Mumfield. Like he sort of looks like Mumfield out there size wise. Blue Hicks is probably a little bit smaller, but he's fast. He's got good speed. They certainly added speed with Andy Jean and Blue Hicks. And so those are some of the spots that I was really most interested in that first week, was just seeing the new guys, those 3 defensive ends, the 3 wide receivers. Jaden Bonsu, kid who came in from Ohio State as a safety. He's going to play star linebacker at Pitt. I mean, he looks the part. He looks like $1 million. A little bit thin for the linebacker spot, but you can add that weight. I mean, Braylon Lovelace was a little thin when he came in. Rasheem Biles was a little thin when he came in. Those guys filled out. I think Jaden Bonsu can do the same, particularly as he makes the transition from safety to outside linebacker. I'm curious to see what his role ends up being. He could end up being the backup star linebacker behind Kyle Lewis this year. Like I say, he looks the part. We got to see if he can actually play football, but he looks like $1 million. And so that's what stood out to me, or what I was most interested in, certainly in the first week. And we'll keep an eye on those guys throughout, this second week of camp, and then the next 3 weeks after this. But beyond the newcomers, I think when you look at the returning guys, I wanted to see how Eli Holstein looked. I wanted to see how the quarterbacks looked overall, because there's only 3 scholarship quarterbacks on the roster this spring. It's Eli Holstein, Julian Duggar, and Mason Heinchel, the true freshman who enrolled in January. So I wanted to see how those guys were kind of moving around. What's the running back group look like? Another small group. You have just a couple of scholarship guys with Desmond Reed and Juelz Goff and Jakarian Turner as the only scholarship backs on the roster this spring. Derek Davis is hurt. I mean, he's technically on the roster, but he's not practicing because he got hurt at Boston College last year in the finale. See how the offensive line was lining up, and I think it's been interesting to see that. We'll probably have we'll get a little bit deeper on that in tomorrow's spring camp report. I plan to keep an eye on those guys. To a certain extent in spring camp, you're just kind of looking to see who changed their body. How do they look body-wise? And not a huge amount of like standout, oh, this guy looks totally different, but everybody looks a little leaner. Ryan Baer said he's thinner than his lowest weight. I think he's at his lowest weight since he was like a junior in high school or something like that. So, guys are I think some of those offensive linemen have slimmed down a little bit, probably gotten into a little bit better shape, continued to improve their conditioning as they move into year 2 with Cade Bell. But those are probably some of the biggest things. A lot of it is just like superficial. Like, how does this guy look? You know what I mean? Like, getting off the bus, who impresses you? Who looks like he's going to be a stud physically. And then we'll see these guys make some more plays over the course of the spring. We'll keep talking to people who watch more of practice than we do and get their thoughts on it. But those are some of the biggest things that we've been keeping an eye on so far in spring camp. All right. RJC Man 38 says Jeff Capel thinks he's too good for the NIT, more mismanagement of men's basketball. So yeah, the NIT conversation. Let's talk about the NIT for a little bit. Pitt announced in a press release from Alan Green, the athletic director, which was interesting. I think it came out on Friday, that they'll be declining any postseason opportunity. They're not going to play in the NIT or any other postseason tournament that invites them. Season's over, a decision they made last year as well. And, I don't know what to make of it. I go back and forth. I think it's a money loser to play in a tournament like that. I think, but at the same time, it's an opportunity to compete. It's an opportunity for some of the young players that you're going to be counting on next year to get out and get some court time. I think it's challenging, and it continues to be challenging to fill these postseason tournaments that are not the NCAA tournament, because you have players who are going into the transfer portal. And once they're going into the transfer portal, they're probably not going to play for that team. They're probably not going to play for the team they're leaving. And so you end up with these like half rosters, probably more and more teams, just saying no, thanks, but no thanks. And I don't even know what Pitt's transfer portal attrition is going to look like. I sort of feel like it's not going to be as bad as a lot of people expect. Bad in terms of numbers. You may be of the mindset that everybody should go and they should just start over from scratch. So in which case, if I say not many guys leave, you'd probably feel like that's a bad outcome. But I sort of get the impression it's not going to be a mass exodus for Pitt basketball in the transfer portal this spring. I mean, we'll see what ends up happening. And I think, everybody's going to define mass exodus differently. But I sort of get the impression that's not going to be the case. But I think there are teams that are losing a bunch of guys. And, how much of a roster do you need to play the NIT? There's a certain point where you say, look, it's just not worth it for us to go play in this tournament if we're going to be missing our 4 top guys or something like that. Between guys who graduate and say, no, I'm just going to opt out like they do in the bowl games, and guys who go into the transfer portal. What kind of roster do you have? Doesn't really help you all that much to go play and, presumably lose with, a partial roster. I think there's a fair amount of sentiment, and I can't entirely say I disagree with it. I think there's a fair amount of sentiment among some Pitt fans of, don't really want to watch this team anymore. And it's been interesting to see the backlash, or I shouldn't even say backlash, but the response from the fans to this decision to skip the NIT in any postseason tournament. It's been interesting to see because I think there is a decent portion of the fan base that says, that's okay. I don't want to watch them anymore. If they are playing, I will watch them because I'm compelled to, because I'm a fan and I have no other choice. I have to watch if they're playing. But if they're not going to play, that's okay with me because I would just as soon not watch anymore. And I understand that. With the way they played over the final 18 games, very little in the way of inspiration, very little in the way of any kind of basketball you would actually want to watch outside of like the Boston College game, basically. But just some miserable performances, some miserable efforts, and overall general disappointment that watching this team in the NIT, I'm not sure it would hold a lot of appeal for a lot of Pitt fans outside of just, if Pitt is playing, I will watch type of thing. I mean, I think back to the last time they were in the NIT with Jamie Dixon, his penultimate season, I think it was. I mean, that was miserable. That was more depressing than the CBI. The CBI, at least we had fun with it. Pitt played hard. They ended up winning the damn thing. The NIT, nobody wanted to be there. And I think there's a fair debate to be had about, should you play in one of these tournaments if nobody wants to be there? You know what I mean? Like, is that the kind of product you want to put on the court? Now, I know, you should have some pride. You should play hard. You should always want to compete, blah, blah, blah. But you can't force it. And, if they don't want to be there, they probably shouldn't do it. And that was the decision they made. And I don't know if it's that they think they're better than the NIT, but I think at the beginning of the season, they believed they were better than the NIT, that they were going to be in the NCAA tournament. I think as the season progressed, the disappointment was so great because everyone believed they were better than an NIT team. And then they get to the end of the season, and it turns out you're not. You're not better than an NIT team. You are right on that level. And I think there was a certain amount of disappointment in that realization, disappointment that probably would have bled over into lackluster efforts and just more disappointment playing in it. So, I went back and forth on it, mixed feelings on the decision to skip the NIT, stronger feelings toward not playing it than I had toward playing it. But again, it's not me that would have to do it. If they were going to play in the NIT, I would cover the games. I would attend the ones that were in Pittsburgh if they had a game here. And certainly we would write about it and probably do a post-game show afterwards. So I guess I should have rooted for them to play in the NIT so we could do another post-game show here on YouTube. But they chose not to do that. Pitt beat WVU says it's going to be hard for Pitt to succeed in this new league. Us fans aren't going to donate until they build a stadium to show us that they're actually going to do something with our money. Here, I'll even read the second part of this comment. They don't have to like it, but it is what it is. They found room to build a stadium in New York and Los Angeles, but there's no room in Pittsburgh. Get out of here. Well, I mean, like, you could find room to build it. Like, if you want to build it in Oakland, you could find somewhere to build it. You could tear down a bunch of stuff. You could eminent domain half the Hill District or something like that. You could tear down stuff of your own. You could tear down the OC lot and, build it there if you want. And you could spend $750 million doing it. And like, I'm going to be honest with you. I don't know you. I don't know you guys who are watching this stream. I've met maybe just a handful of you in person, so I can't speak for you. But I don't think that if Pitt committed to spend $750 million on building a stadium, you would donate 1 red cent more to NIL than you already are. And I also do think that out of $750 million, Pitt could take 1% of $750 million. Is that 7.5? Pitt could take 1% of that money, use it on players through NIL, and win a whole and have a direct effect on winning a lot more games than $750 million on a stadium would generate. Because you know what? You could spend $750 million or $500 million or however much you want to spend, however much you think it's going to spend to make it feasible to build a stadium in Oakland. You could spend all that money and it still doesn't matter if you don't have the players. And don't tell me like, oh, the players will flock to Pitt if they have a stadium on campus. The players don't care. They care less now than they did 15 years ago. All that matters now is the money. It's just the money. You can keep playing in Acrisure Stadium, and if you come up with the NIL money, you will get the players. Eli Holstein didn't come to Pitt because of the facilities. I mean, it helped, but he came to Pitt because of the NIL. You know, when they got Keaton Slovis, when they got Konate Mumfield, some of these like good wins out of the transfer portal, it didn't have anything to do about where the stadium was. It was NIL. And when they've lost commitments or they've missed out on transfer targets, it doesn't have anything to do with the stadium. It doesn't, like, there hasn't been a single transfer that Pitt was in seriously with who stood at Acrisure Stadium looking out over the river and said, yeah, I wish I could go to classes, within a 5-minute walk. Nobody says that. It's NIL. It's money. And that's what it comes down to. And this is the same thing with the Jeff Cable buyout thing of like, you have to think about what makes sense. Where is the smart way to spend your money? And spending money to make a coach go away, spending money on a stadium, spending money on anything like that, anything that is not directly involved in bringing players to Pitt is not the best use of money. And so you talk about like, we're not going to donate until like, Pitt WVU says this. I don't think most Pitt fans share this opinion, but you say, I'm not going to donate any money until they build a stadium. What do you think is going to happen? Like, they need your money now, and they're going to need your money then too, but they need your money now. And if you really want wins, that's what you have to contribute to. That's the role that fans can play. It's not hard to figure out. And the reality is, like, honestly, those of us on this live stream probably aren't the ones who are going to really make an impact in that regard. Every little bit counts. Every little bit helps for sure. Every little $20 membership, $20 a month donation is big for the collective and NIL. They need the big money guys. They need guys to come through with 7-figure donations and 6-figure donations so that they can build up the NIL coffers and go get good players. Because if you invest in NIL and go get the players, I bet you Jeff Cable wins. And that's not to say he didn't have the players this year. Like, I mean, they had good players. They should have had better success than they did. But go get the players and Pat Narduzzi will win. Go get the players and Jeff Cable will win. We're going to find out about women's basketball, who just landed a top 100 recruit. Again, because NIL is how you get it done. Your stadium doesn't matter. It doesn't matter like it used to. It really doesn't. And it especially doesn't matter for the transfers. Like I'll tell you that. It especially doesn't matter for the transfers. It might still hold some sway over the high school kids, but the transfers, particularly if you're getting a guy going power 4 to power 4, and you're trying to recruit a guy out of like the Big 12 or the Big 10 or something like that, like, they don't care about the crowd. They don't care about the stadium. What's the dollar figure? Seriously. So, like, your on-campus stadium, which solves none of your problems, by the way. Like, I mean, not to get too far off in this rant. Like, the only thing I've ever heard, like, the only thing that makes sense that could possibly have a leg to stand on as well it'll be easier for the students to get to. Yeah, that's true. It'll be incredibly harder for everyone else to get to, but it'll be easier for the students to get to, which is not unimportant, except for this fact. The students show up. It's the grown-ups who don't go to the games. It's the grown-ups whose seats go unused. The students are at the games. The Panther Pit is full. Like, the students show up for Pitt football, even if they have to ride school buses all the way to the North Shore. So that's not even the problem. So you solve none of your problems. You go $750 million into debt, and you still have to come up with a few million each year to actually fill out your roster. You're going at it backward. Get the players. And you know what? Here's what I'll add too. If you get the players and that leads to wins, if you get the players and you start succeeding, you know what's going to happen? The rising tide. Because if you win games, people will be more inclined to donate money. And then maybe they can donate enough that you do start looking into a stadium. How do we get on stadium talk? What are you doing? Why are you bringing up stadium talk here? You're talking about uniforms next? Get out of here. Let's see. John Christofich says Jeff Capel would rather go on vacation than play in the NIT. I don't think he's on vacation. I think he's going through meetings with the players and trying to find out who's going to be on the team and get ready to start digging through the transfer portal, trying to get a sense of who's going to be out there and who Pitt can get. Pitt Wins says, why would anyone donate to Pitt instead of investing in NIL? You build a volleyball arena. People are dumb here. Well, I would say this. It's not like they got much in the way of donations for the volleyball arena. That money's pretty much coming from the university, so taking on debt service to pay for that building. So at least it's not like people have been donating hundreds of millions of dollars to the volleyball arena as as opposed to NIL. So at least that's not happening. RJC Man says Alan Green is not impressing anyone by being so silent and using cryptic messaging to outline his vision for fundraising. Meanwhile, Green not addressing how poorly the basketball program has been the last 10 years and 700 cable and one NCAA bid. I mean, like, I don't know. What do you I don't know. Everybody wants him to come out and, I don't know, lay down a gauntlet or say Jeff Capel's on the hot seat or something like that. I don't know. Like, how often I don't know. I would like to interview Alan Green. I'd like him to do some more press opportunities. I'd like to ask him questions about 1,000 different things. It's just, he's working behind the scenes, I guess, right? And you talk about cryptic messaging to outline the vision for fundraising. They need to be active. They need to be proactive. They need to have a plan for how they're going to address revenue sharing, how they're going to pay this money, how they're going to come up with $20.5 million for the players over the summer. Like, they need to figure that out. Now, he doesn't necessarily need to share that plan with you and I. It'd be cool if he did, but he's under no particular obligation to do it. It's not going to affect his plan one way or the other. If he does, all it's going to do is open it up to criticism, which doesn't ultimately matter. Pitt BWVU says you can't constantly build volleyball, baseball, track, softball, and soccer arenas. And until there's no reason for football, but you want money, I wouldn't even give you my change after buying a hot dog and tell us there's no room. RJC Man 38, non-campus stadium is a must, non-negotiable with an open end zone showcasing the cathedral. It doesn't do anything. Is that it's not going to increase donations. All you're doing is creating a new place for the money to go when the money needs to go to the players. If you want to win football games, it doesn't matter where your stadium is. It doesn't matter if you have a view of the cathedral. It doesn't matter if it's brand new or it's old. It doesn't matter. You have to get the players. So that's where the money has to go. All right. Let's see. You guys are just talking about stadiums. I don't want to talk about stadiums anymore. RJC Man, how does a top 25 university and endowment dollars have such poor NIL? It's because the fans don't donate. It's because the fans are not engaged with it. Because the fans want to sit back and complain about it rather than taking an active role. And finally, after all these years of backdoor dealing and carpetbaggers and, bagmen and all that different stuff, like everything that sort of defined college sports for all those years, the bad old days. Finally, fans can do it legally, and Pitt fans don't. Like, and I don't blame you. Do whatever you want with your money. But when you talk about why do they have such a poor NIL program and poor, it's because fans don't donate to it. The opportunity is there. The system is there. It's set up. It's operating. Here's how you get the players. Fans choose not to. And so the fans sit back and complain about the players. Well, we need better this, need better that. Why isn't the offensive line better? I mean, because they got what they could afford. And if you watch this year and if the offensive line's not good, well, this is what they could afford. So, fans finally have an opportunity to have a direct impact on it and direct role. And a lot of them choose not to. All right. Let's see. You guys are just arguing about all this stuff. Let's see. Here, Adam Vinchik says, I know the transfer portal for basketball opens next week. When does it close? When can you expect Capel to sign some guys? So it opens, I think on Monday, I want to say is the date. And it closes, I think, April 22nd, I believe is the close of the portal. Now, remember, when the portal opens and closes, those are just the dates for when guys when guys can go into the portal. It's not like at April 22nd, you can't get any more guys out of the portal. You can still get them. The 22nd is the cutoff date. I think it's April 22nd is the cutoff date for when guys can go into the portal. So you have that 4 weeks or whatever it is from the 25th to the 22nd. But then you have time beyond the 20, that those 4 weeks is when guys can enter the portal. Guys can exit at any point. So Jeff Capel could land guys in that period, and he probably will get a couple. He could land guys beyond that period, and he probably will, I would think. I think, you didn't ask about priorities out of the portal, but I think when you look at the portal and what Pitt needs or what they could need or what they should get, some of it is going to depend on who they bring back. Obviously, if you lose like Jalen Lowe, well, you need a point guard, right? And you need another point guard to go with Brandon Cummings. If you lose Cam Corrin or you lose Guillermo Diaz-Graham, you need another center to play with Papa Amadou Conti or whoever's left. So some of it is going to be influenced by that. I think one of the top priorities has to be a power forward, a four. And that four could look like a lot of different types of guys. He could, I don't know if he would look like the big, play down low, get on the blocks, rebound, Chevy Troutman. I don't know if he would necessarily be a Blake Hinson because there's only one of those guys. Could be an outside guy, an outside shooter, a stretch guy. It could be a Zach Austin guy, just a really athletic guy who can do a bunch of different things, but maybe not be a focal point of your offense. Could be a good defender. I mean, you're going to need somebody to fill that spot because even if you bring back Guillermo and Cam Corrin and Papa Amadou Conti, like I think all three of those guys have to pretty much play at center. I don't think you can go with Guillermo as the four again in the final 2 games of the season. They finally went away from that. Guillermo only played center along with Cam Corrin. They were in kind of a rotation there as opposed to playing together. And I think that's a better lineup for Pitt. It's better on a lot of levels. It's better for the individual skill sets. I think it's better for the guys that they put on the court overall, the group that they are able to put out there. And so I think they have to carry that into next season. If they have Guillermo and Corrin and Conti back or any combination thereof, I think all of those guys have to be at center and be there exclusively. And really that just means not moving Guillermo out to the 4. Now, part of that, part of the idea of keeping Guillermo exclusively at center ties into something else that I think is pretty important from this season. It's something that I probably didn't think enough about or talk enough about or give enough credence to. I was really quick to, and I even said this probably as recently as last week. I wrote it probably in the 321 column. The Jeff Capel can't, when he takes stock of this season, he can't make an excuse or he can't use Damian Dunn's injury as an excuse. Well, we would have been fine if Damian Dunn didn't get hurt. We would have done this or we would have done that if we didn't lose Dame. And I was like, you can't use that as an excuse. You have to look a little more closely at your own decisions about what you chose to do personnel wise and deployment and how you chose to play and all of those things. Like you have to self scout and not just cast it off and well, we lost Damian Dunn and that was the biggest problem. You can't do that. And I still largely believe that. I still largely feel like you can't just put it on Dunn's injury and, well, that's it. Would have been better if he didn't get hurt. You can't put it all on that. But more and more, I've come around to the idea that this team struggled or suffered when they didn't have 3 ball handlers on the court. That when they only had Lowe and Leggett with Austin, Guillermo, and Corin, they really just had 2 guards, 2 ball handlers, obviously, and then 3 like complementary players. 3 guys who can't really create for themselves, 3 guys who aren't really going to do anything off the dribble, 3 guys who, when they get the ball, probably around the perimeter, they're just waiting until it's time to hand it back to Lowe or Leggett. And when you're in that situation, I think it complicates everything. I think it makes life more difficult for everyone on the court. Lowe, I think, benefited and Leggett benefited when they had 3 guys like that out on the court. When there were only 2, I think it was a lot easier to defend Pitt. I think it was a lot easier to watch what they did and check them and kind of keep them in check and prevent that dribble penetration from being as effective as it was when they had 3 guys who could do it. I think they got better when they played Brandon Cummings more. I think they got better when they played Amsal Delilich more. And I think they were better when they had Damian Dunn out there more. You look at evanmaya.com, you can go through like all the lineups and check all the lineups that Pitt used over the course of the season for their efficiency. And the most efficient lineups Pitt had on both ends of the court, but particularly offensively, the most efficient lineups Pitt had were when they had 3 guards on the court, when it was Lowe, Leggett, Dunn. Sometimes Lowe, Leggett, Cummings, or some combination thereof, Delilich even in there. But when they only had 2 guards and the 3 complementary players, Austin, Corin, and Guillermo or Papa Conti, only having 2 guards, they were far less efficient. And I think it trickled down to everything. I think life got more difficult for the guards, and I don't think they were able to set up Austin or Guillermo or Corin for what they were hoping to set them up for, what they should have been able to set them up for if they had 3 ball handlers on the court at one time. And so I think that, just as you kind of go through overall thoughts about the team, after the season ends, just kind of what worked and what didn't and where they struggled and where they could have been better. I think that was a big problem. And and the Dunn injury helped create some of that problem because now they were down to just Lowe and Leggett. But of course, as we all know, and as I've said a million times, that was when you needed to get more minutes for Brandon Cummings. That was when you needed to get more minutes for Amsal Delilich. You had to get those guys out there more than you did. And I don't think they got them on the court enough. You needed them out there playing as much as possible so they got comfortable, so that once you got into the ACC, they could play. They were ready to go. And then when Dunn got hurt again, they weren't really ready. And so Pitt spent a lot of time with just 2 guards and 3 complementary players. And the results are that their offense wasn't very efficient. The results, I think Jalen Lowe's individual play suffered because of that. No, I think Jalen Lowe's individual play suffered for a lot of reasons. Some of them self-inflicted. But I think it suffered in part because of the lineups they were using and how they were trying to play and the personnel groupings they were trying to create. And so, I do think there needs to be a priority on making sure their lineups are primarily 3 guard lineups. So, you're going to be dependent upon who you bring back. Obviously, Ishmael Leggett's gone, so he's not going to be there. But if you can get Lowe, Cummings, and Delilich back, you need those 3 on the court all the time. I would guess that you're probably going to try and bring in 1 or 2 transfer guards. You might only be able to get 1. If you have Lowe, Cummings, and Delilich back, which is probably a possibility, it's probably I would assume it will be tough to get multiple transfer guards to come in. But if you could get 1 and you can kind of rotate through 3 guard lineups with those those four guys, Lowe, Cummings, Delilich, and a transfer, then I think you can probably have a more efficient offense. I think Jalen Lowe's game will be better. I think Brandon Cummings and Delilich would play better. I think everybody would play better. Even if you have those three plus a transfer four and, Corin or Guillermo or Conti, whoever it might be, it's, I just think it'll work better. I think it'll be more efficient and more productive and a better lineup overall. All right. Let's see. Try not to read any more of these comments about stadiums because that's the lowest form of that's the lowest form of discourse. Let's see. Anthony Tennyson says, as much as I love watching the basketball team, I did not need to see one more game this year, so I'm okay with them not playing. Build the team for next year, get some players, pay the money. That's important. That's important for sure. RJ, no, I'm not even reading that. John Jingleheimer Schmidt says, any transfer basketball news, incoming or outgoing? Nothing. No. There's not going to be anything incoming at least until next week because really guys can't officially enter the portal until next week. And I know that there are names coming out that so-and-so has, intends to enter the portal or plans to enter the portal. I mean, that's all like intending and planning. They're not officially in the portal yet. And so we're seeing some of those reports. It's starting to trickle out. That's the transfer season is firing up, but you're not going to really get anything incoming until those guys can officially be in the portal. And as far as guys outgoing, nothing yet. I think Jeff Capel's meeting with those players, trying to get a sense of where they stand, probably trying to help convince the ones that he wants back and trying to, get a feel for the ones that maybe are ready to move on or he's ready for them to move on. So, it's all just kind of, there's rumors and stuff like that. We're kind of trying to monitor the rumors and see what sounds like it might be legitimate, what might have legs. But otherwise it's wait and see, just kind of sitting tight. And it's, actually it's great because you get 4 days of basketball here starting tomorrow. I know there's basketball last night and tonight, but the tournament really starts tomorrow with the field of 64. You get 4 days of basketball. And then on Monday, we dive into the transfer portal. You see who's out there. Thousands of guys will enter the portal and we'll see which ones Pitt's able to grab. Joey Deli says, I'm really excited for Ja'Karian Turner, the freshman running back. I think he could get a lot of playing time, but we will see. So it's interesting to see. I'm getting distracted again by subsequent comments. Some of the stuff is ridiculous. The freshman running back, Ja'Karian Turner. So it's interesting. Last year, maybe in August, maybe during the season, I forget. I remember asking Kay Bell something to the effect of, it seems like running backs typically are able to adjust to the college game quicker. Like running backs get on the field as freshmen sooner than maybe other positions. That's just historically been the case. We've seen it at Pitt with freshman running backs having great seasons. LaShawn McCoy, Dion Lewis, obviously. James Conner was pretty solid as a freshman. Lots of guys have had. It just seems like a position that you can get on the field early and play. And Kay Bell was like, yeah, that's often the case, but not so much in his offensive scheme. Part of the reason is because the running backs have a lot to do. Running backs have a lot of jobs. Not as much pass blocking, I think, but more receiving and running routes and really being involved in a lot of aspects of the offense. And I thought that was interesting. I think Desmond Reed played a lot of Western Carolina as a freshman, but it'll be interesting to see what Ja'Karian Turner does this year. Pitt didn't bring in any transfer running backs. They brought in 3 freshmen. Turner's here now, and Sinquan Smith and Cameron Sapp? No. The other guy they got late is a running back. I forget who. I'm drawing a blank on his name right now. So they have some freshmen coming in. Turner's the only one who's here now as a January enrollee. So he's getting all this time in spring camp. but their depth is not great at running back. I mean, they have Desmond Reed, they have Juelz Goff, and that's it for the scholarship backs. And then it's Turner. And so you would think that there's probably going to be an opportunity for him to get on the field, or for a third back to get on the field, whoever that might be, whether it's a freshman or if they find a veteran guy as a transfer in the spring portal window. Desmond Reed's obviously your number one guy. You're counting on him to be really good this year, just like he was last year. And even though he's sort of got a reputation as getting hurt a lot, he still played quite a bit. I think he played more last year than he had at either of his first 2 years of college. He played a lot. He carried the ball a lot. He's definitely not soft. I mean, Pat Narduzzi always talked about how he was one of the toughest guys on the team. I mean, you could see that. He's tough out there. He's tough to bring down, and he plays tough. He gets banged up. He got banged up a lot. There were a lot of times, probably every game, where he limped off the field, but it very rarely was the end of the game for him. He usually came back and kept playing. So he is tough. I think he can take a lot of beating. I think he can take a lot of contact and keep going. But you do need multiple backs. There are going to be times when you have to rotate your backs. There are going to be times where your starter needs some time, needs a few series off or a few plays off or whatever it might be. And Juelz Goff is going to fill that role and as the backup. And I think he'll be good. I thought Juelz Goff was good at the end of the season last year when he got on the field. I think he's going to play well this year. I think he'll be a really good back for Pitt. But even then, you need another guy. And so this spring could almost... this spring maybe will dictate what they do to try to address that number 3 running back spot. If they come out of spring camp feeling like Ja'Karian Turner is not only an impactful playmaker, which he is, he's got the speed, he's got that breakaway speed, he can be really good like that. And so they know they have that in Ja'Karian Turner, but also, the matter of whether he's picked up the offense enough that they could trust him, that they feel confident that they can put him in there, in the season and have him play. Those two questions, if they feel good about both of those coming out of spring camp, they might feel like they don't need to go get a transfer in the spring portal window. If they don't feel great about where Turner is, or feel like, he's just not as far enough along as they would like him to be, then maybe they go get somebody, a veteran back. It's going to be tricky because you're trying to bring in a veteran running back at a spot where you've got a returning All-American in Desmond Reed and a backup who looked pretty good last year. So you're selling a guy on being at best in a timeshare for the number 2 job. With the understanding the number 1 job's not up for grabs, which can be a tough sell for a transfer. But it's going to be interesting to see what they do there. I think that might be one of the more interesting spring portal storylines, that and whether they try to get an Ivy League quarterback to be the number 3, because they could probably use a veteran number 3 quarterback. There again, that's a tough sell. Can you convince a guy to be your 3rd quarterback? Because obviously obviously the number 1 job is not up for grabs. And I would say Julian Duggar did a pretty darn good job establishing himself as the number 2 last year in the bowl game. So you're going to have a hard time selling anybody on the idea that there's anything more than the number 2 job available here, or anything better than the number 3 job available, which means it could be tricky. So a quarterback and running back both sort of in the same position, thin in terms of veteran players, scholarship guys coming back. Probably could use a veteran to join the ranks. Not really sure if they're going to be able to find that. Now, there's something to be said about the quarterback position that if you get down to your number 3 guy, it kind of doesn't matter because you're probably screwed anyway. So you might as well just go with Mason Heinschel, the freshman who's on campus now, rather than go bring in a guy. You might as well just stick with Heinschel if you find yourself having to go to your number 3 quarterback. Let's see here. RJC Man 38 is a super chatter, and he wants to say, Chris, you failed to hold Pitt institutionally responsible for the failings of athletes' poor NIL. Blame the customer? That's dumb. Well, I mean, the customer's not, in this case, the customer has a role as someone who can facilitate this. Now, Pitt, I do think institutionally, if you want to look at it from that angle, was slow to get on board. I don't think the Pitt, the university, the athletic department did all it could to sort of facilitate NIL efforts and what Alliance 412 and the collective were trying to do throughout the past probably 2 years, if not more. And so, yeah, I would hold some responsibility, but I think most people are aware of what the situation is in college sports right now. I think a lot of Pitt fans are aware of the efforts of Alliance 412 and the collective and what it means. And there are a lot of Pitt fans who are just saying, no, I don't want to do it. So, yeah, I sort of do blame the customer because the customer's role is, I mean, there's not like a good, like, I was going to try and make some like witty metaphor or something. There's not a good parallel here, but I mean, yes, the Pitt fans are the customers, but they also have a hand in assembling the team, right? Through donations that can be used to be used to bring in players. So there is, there is some blame for Pitt fans who didn't and haven't contributed to the collective. You know, I think Alliance 412 had a great sales pitch last year. As they went through the season and into the fall and into the winter and said, look, you know, this is what happens when we don't have the money to get adequate depth on the offensive line. You know, 7-0 turns into 7-6. And like that was the sales pitch. And, you know, some fans, I think, responded to it. And some were like, why would I donate to a team that can't even beat Toledo? Well, you have to ask yourself, why didn't they beat Toledo? And it's not, I mean, it is because of a field goal, you know, in second overtime on 4th and goal, but it's also not. You know, why did they even end up in overtime against Toledo? It's because of a lack of depth. You know, lack of depth at quarterback, lack of depth on the offensive line. And, you know, why were they in those situations? Why did they have a lack of depth on the offensive line? Well, why did they have a lack of depth at quarterback? Because the quarterback got hurt. Why did the quarterback get hurt? Due at least in part because the offensive line was poor in blocking. Why was the offensive line poor and not deep enough? Because they weren't able to get all the offensive linemen they needed out of the transfer portal. And so there is some amount of blame that goes around to a lot of parties, including fans who did or did not donate. Let's see. Scrolling through here. Pitt Tough Guy says, why is Pitt wasting time recruiting high school players that are less than 4 stars? It's all about recruiting players from programs less than Power 4 or G5 and FCS. 3 stars are for scout team and holding tackle dummies. You know, I mean, there's a whole other conversation to have about recruiting, you know, the top ranked guys and then, you know, recruiting 3 stars. And the reality is Pitt has found a lot of success recruiting 3 stars. Like if you're not going to get all of the top guys, you need to be able to evaluate well, project well, and coach well. And I think Pitt has done that a lot over the years with football. I mean, like you look at some of the biggest impact players at Pitt, you know, in the last 20 years, right? Like who have been some of the best players at Pitt in the last 20 years? Sure, there's Jordan Whitehead. He was a 4-star. Dorian Johnson was a 5-star. LaShawn McCoy obviously was a 4-star. Larry Fitzgerald was a 4-star. So there have been lots of those guys. But you know who else there's been? There's been Kenny Pickett. He was a 3-star. Dion Lewis. He was a 3-star. Aaron Donald. He was a 3-star. You know, James Conner. He was a 3-star. Darrell Revis. He might have been a 2-star actually. You know, yeah, Tyler Boyd was a 4-star. Jonathan Baldwin was a 5-star. But a lot of these guys over the years, Patrick Jones and Rashad Weaver were 2 stars. Brian O'Neill was a 3-star, maybe a 2-star. You know, like Jalen Twyman was a 3-star. Kalijah Cansey was a 3-star. I mean, we could go down the list. All these safeties they've had. Yeah, DeMar Hamlin and Paris Ford were 4 stars. So was Donovan McMillan. But Brandon Hill and Eric Hallett and Javon McIntyre and Cruz Brookins, like all these guys that they've had have been 3 stars. Servassier Dennis was a 2-star. Kyle Lewis was a 3-star. Rasheem Biles was a 3-star. I mean, I could go on and on down the list of some of the best players Pitt has had under Pat Narduzzi and the decade before that. And a lot of them came out of that 3-star ranks because Pitt trusted their evaluations and they were able to coach up the players that they properly evaluated. No, it doesn't always work out with 3 stars, but it doesn't always work out with 4 or 5 stars either. So, I think if you're Pitt, there's some positions you're probably not going to get those top rated guys. Offensive line, quarterback, you're probably not going to get the number 1 guys. And so you've got to evaluate well and have a good plan for how you're going to recruit and how you're going to coach and how you're going to develop in order to get the most out of the guys you get. Let's see. Still talking about stadiums. I know I said, it doesn't matter. Stadium doesn't matter. Pippi WVU says, Penn State literally builds their whole program off their stadium in the atmosphere. Ohio State, Alabama, literally every powerhouse. Show me a powerhouse who rents a stadium with a bad atmosphere. Dude. Oh, it says, don't worry. I'll wait. Yeah, you've been waiting. You made this comment a half hour ago. You've been waiting. All those things you're talking about, Penn State and Ohio State and Alabama, they built their powerhouse off the stadium. They did. Yeah, they sold, attendance and all those kinds of things. But guess what? That doesn't rate as high anymore. I'm talking about right now. I'm not talking about recruiting in 2002 or 1982 or 1972. I'm talking about recruiting in 2025. And recruiting in 2025 is about one thing: straight cash, homie. That's it. Okay, your atmosphere again for high school kids, they'll get wowed by that, and then when they go into the portal in 2 years, they look for the money. And sometimes, a lot of times, there's an overlap. The school with the biggest attendance, this is going to blow your mind. All right, the schools with the biggest attendance: Ohio State, Penn State, Alabama, Texas. Guess what they also have? Not only do they have fans who are willing to go to the game, which, like, Pitt doesn't fill a 68,000 seat stadium. These schools are filling 100,000 seat stadiums. Schools that have fans who are willing to go to the games, you know what else they do? They donate to NIL. And guess what happens? They go win, and then they win, and then because they win, people donate more money. And not one bit of that has to do with how big their stadium is or where their stadium's located. It has to do with having a passionate fan base who is dedicated to the cause. Stadium. Here, you can keep waiting for me to name a powerhouse who rents a stadium with a bad atmosphere. I don't know, Miami? How about that? If you consider Miami a powerhouse. Miami certainly considers Miami a powerhouse. All right, I'm getting out of here. I'm just moving on from this. Scrolling down. Same stuff. You guys are all just saying the same thing. I don't know how do we get... Oh, here. We'll finish on this question. Joey Deli says, who's your breakout player for next year? I know it's early, but who do you think it is in football? I think... breakout players. See, I keep thinking about this and trying to figure out. I mean, like Cruz Brookins, I think is going to have a really good season. I think Rasheem Biles could end up having a better season than Kyle Lewis had last year. I think Braylon Lovelace. Actually, let's say Braylon Lovelace. I think I'll pick one on each side of the ball for you. I think Braylon Lovelace will have a breakout year this year. I think he got overshadowed. Well, he was in a reserve role last year, right? So Biles and Lewis had big seasons because they were starters around Brandon George at middle linebacker. But this year, I think Biles and Lewis will start with Lovelace in the middle. He'll be the starting middle linebacker. I think he'll have like 85 tackles. I think he'll have a big season. And all three of those guys will play really, really well. Lewis, Lovelace, and Biles. So I would say Lovelace on defense, and then offensively, like I still think it's possible for Kenny Johnson to have a breakout season, even though he's done pretty exceptional things in each of his first 2 years. I still don't think he's had that huge season yet. He catch last year like 40 passes or 45 passes. I think he can have a giant season, like a 75 catch, 10 touchdowns, 1,000-yard season. I think he's capable of that. I think that's the caliber of player he is. He just needs to get the opportunity. He needs to get the volume, which he hasn't had. I think if he gets that kind of volume this year, he'll make big plays and have a huge season. So my two breakout picks, and it's funny because they both played a lot. They've both done a lot of things. I mean, Braylon Lovelace had a pick 6 last year, right? it's not. And he had what did he do at? Was it Virginia Tech or West Virginia 2 years ago? He had a block punt or something like that. So he's done things. He's made plays. Kenny Johnson has obviously made a lot of plays. He's been a starter, but I feel like both of those guys can take a big step forward this season and have real breakout years and really blow up. I really do. So those would be my two guys that I'm picking right now on March 19th. This is all subject to change. March 20th, I could have a completely different idea. But those would be my two guys for now, Lovelace and Kenny Johnson. Book it and lock it. Book it and lock it. All right, here's what you can also do. In addition to booking it and locking it, you can like it and you can subscribe to it. Like this video and subscribe to youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. And don't forget to check out the website, Panther-Lair.com. It's just blood in the water when we start talking about stadiums. And here we are. I think we just wasted a decent chunk of this show talking about stadiums. So I'm always game for it. I always like yelling about it, and I appreciate everybody who tunes in for it as well. So thanks for tuning in tonight. I appreciate all the comments and questions and everybody who watched the video and listened to it later in the day or whenever it might be. Don't forget to check in for the Morning Pit tomorrow. Go check out the website, Panther-Lair.com. And I think that might be all I have to say to you. So thanks for tuning in tonight. I hope you've had a great week so far. Enjoy the rest of your Wednesday. We'll catch up with you tomorrow morning for the Morning Pit right here on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com.